Today, we're going to be going over part 2 of the Rust Iceberg. For those of you unfamiliar with icebergs, what it is a picture of an iceberg with multiple levels. As you get deeper as far as the levels go, the concepts get a little bit more obscure. So we've already done part 1 of the Rust Iceberg. If you want to see that, check out that video. It should be linked down below. But let's get on with part 2. So for part 2 of the Rust Iceberg, the first thing we have is Garry's mind map. To understand what Garry's mind map is, you first need to know who Garry is. And Garry is the creator of Rust. So if you love Rust, this is who you should be worshiping. Garry's mind map is basically a map outlining where he believes or thinks that the game should go. This was originally put out in 2014 and has things like controller input, bare hands, weather cycles, mining, farming, vehicles, server transitioning, user-created content, and more. A lot of these things did come true, but not all of them. Anyways, it's an interesting read, and you can really see the direction that he was hoping to take Rust. And the cool thing is, a lot of these things did manage to come true, so it seems like he did actually do a pretty good job of taking the game in this direction. Next up, we've got drones. So back in the day, people wanted to add drones to Rust, and go figure that actually did happen since this iceberg's been created. So yeah, the idea behind it would be drones would be added to Rust, and I'm not sure if people are thinking they could be player controlled or just go to shops like they do now, but yeah, drones were something that they talked about adding to Rust, and they actually did get added to Rust. Unlike the next thing on this Rust Iceberg, and that would be bridges, an idea which has been floated multiple times for Rust. Last time they've been talked about was back in 2020. Face Punch released a few images to their Instagram that included 2 bridges. So this would be a concrete bridge and a steel bridge. It's unknown whether they were planned to be monuments or just additions to the road system, but yeah, bridges were something that they've considered adding to Rust multiple times, and I think one of these days they actually will be added. Unfortunately, that day is not today. Next up would be a whale event. So whale event was this idea that a whale would randomly spawn on beaches and you could farm those whales for large amounts of bones, animal fat, and maybe meat. But yeah, basically the idea would be that whales would randomly spawn up on beaches and players could actually use those whales to farm materials that you typically get from a bear, a boar, a deer, or any other sort of animal that you might happen to kill. Humans. Anyways, yeah, that would be the whale event. Next up on the Rust Iceberg would be old pump jacks. So everybody's familiar with a pump jack, what a pump jack is. What a lot of people don't know is that the pump jack used to be a craftable item. So a few years ago, 7, pump jacks were craftable items that players could craft, place in their base, and then have them harvest materials for them. This obviously led to a lot of people just sitting in their base and letting pump jacks farm. So with devblog number 87, it was announced that pump jacks would no longer be craftable, and that's what I think this iceberg was referring to, and it said the old pump jack. Next up is paper. So paper used to be a resource that you could craft from wood in Rust. You take 5 wood to create a single piece of paper, and then you'd use paper to make things like building plans, paper maps, and notes. Next after that, we've got mid-grade fuel. So back in June of 2015, it was announced that mid-grade fuel was coming to Rust. So the way that would work is basically you'd have low-grade fuel, mid-grade fuel, and high-grade fuel. High-grade fuel was covered in part 1 of the Rust Iceberg, and for whatever reason, the creator of the Rust Iceberg decided that mid-grade fuel was a tier 2 thing, and high-grade was a tier 1. I'm not 100% sure why, but basically, yeah, the idea was there'd be a fuel system, and based on the quality of the device that you wanted to use, you'd need to select an appropriate level of fuel. And next up, we've got slot machines, but all of you probably know about that because the sponsor, no, I'm just kidding. I don't actually do that. Yeah, what slot machines is about is that it was talked about adding slot machines to Rust. This actually happened. You can go into the game and play on slot machines. So yeah, this really isn't a level 2 iceberg sort of thing, but back in the day it was. Also, while we're on the topic of gambling, I'm going to make a lot of creators and people in general mad by saying that you probably shouldn't be using a lot of these Rust skin gambling sites. Even if it was a legitimate gambling, you'd probably lose money because there's a reason that casinos have so many crazy things. Have you ever been to Vegas? It's insane. And that is all built on people's losses. But to make things even worse, a lot of these skin gambling sites won't even pay out your wins, even if you do happen to win. And yes, those sites can be rigged so you don't win, or they might be giving fake spins to some sort of creator as part of their payout. Yes, there are deals like that. But even if none of that is happening and it's all 100% legit, if you do happen to win a large amount, it's always possible that they could try and KYC you. So if you're under the legal gambling age, they might not just give you your payout anyways, saying that it's illegal for them to do so. And even if you are above the legal gambling age, they might just disappear and run off with your money. Or in some cases, people who've won large amounts have had to negotiate with the site to get some sort of payout. Think of it like this. You decide to buy a lottery ticket despite the chances that you're probably never going to win. You win $100 million, and then the owner of the lottery gets in touch with you and says, hey, we're not actually going to give you $100 million. We'll give you one to keep quiet. Yeah, that actually does happen with skin gambling sites in general, not just Rust skin gambling. So word of warning there, but back to the iceberg with the XP system. So the XP system was something that was going to be brought to Rust where players could basically earn XP. They'd earn it through fishing, farming, crafting, finding crates, smashing barrels, hunting, feeding other players. I'm not sure if that means actually like killing them, getting killed by them or what. Foraging, destroying the attack helicopter, or just gutting fish. In addition, the XP system had a sort of setup where players could craft an item, and if that item was ever used by anyone else, they'd get the XP that was gained by that item. It's a really interesting system, but one that they completely dropped from development and never planned to add back in. So yeah, there was an XP system. It was somewhat worked out, but that's just not the direction that Rust decided to go in. Next up, we've got contraband skins. So these are skins that you can no longer trade, buy, or find on the market. This is done for various reasons. Some of those items are just sort of locked to an account. Some of those items are copyrighted, and some of those items are just unobtainable because so few of them were sold. Obvious contraband skins, or contraband in quotation mark skins, would be any of those Twitch drop skins because you can't get those anymore. You only had the drop to get them. Some more interesting contraband skins would be things like the metal tree door, which went onto the market for a very short period of time and then was immediately taken off to the point that only 10 of them exist, which is why they're selling for so much. And the famed Punisher mask. In the case of the Punisher mask, from what I've read, this was a copyright issue, and in the case of the metal tree door, nobody knows exactly why it was taken down, but again, a lot of people think it was a copyright issue. If you're interested in hearing about more contraband skins, make sure you comment down below because I would be willing to do a video like that. But for now, we're going back to the iceberg and going over pay-to-win items, or pay-to-win skins. So basically what it is there are some skins in the game that make it easier for you to win. So certain doors that you can see through, one of them would be the Twig door, which just recently dropped. Another one would be the door to heaven. Also, there was a Twitch drop with a metal door that you could see through. You got a whole bunch of camouflage skins that make it a lot harder to see players. You've also got the Arctic suit, which is really great if you plan to play in any winter biomes and gives you a definite advantage. And then you've got a bunch of guns that have glowing sights. Glowing sights used to be a lot more advantageous before they actually added crosshairs into the game, but yeah, glowing sights would be one of the skins that would definitely pay to win back in the day. Also, you've got things like Christmas lights, which were made before electricity, so they don't really need any electricity and still light up your base. And in that respect, you can consider a lot of glowing doors, glowing boxes, and things like that to be pay-to-win skins. There's a whole host of them, and I'm not going to go over every single one of them. But again, if you really want a video, make sure you comment down below and let me know. But moving on with the Rust Iceberg, next up, we've got animal farms. So I couldn't really find too much on this, but apparently back in the day, there was talk about adding some sort of farming system to Rust. Now, to an extent, there is a farming system in Rust. There are ways that you can farm animals. There's ways that you can collect a bunch of horses and farm them. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can do around farming animals or even fish, but apparently if you go far enough back, there was an idea to create Farmville in Rust. And if you understand the reference I just made, you're pretty old, just like me. And continuing on with the animal theme, next up, we've got fishing. Fishing was added to Rust, so there's no point in really covering this, but they did talk about adding fishing, and guess what? They added it. After fishing, we've got beehives. Now, these were not added to Rust, but the idea behind beehives was there'd be beehives in Rust that you could find when you're running around. Likely, they'd be attached to trees, and you could probably farm something like honey from them. Maybe the bees would sting you or something like that. It never was really fleshed out. The only time it really comes up is if you look back into Garry's mind map, you can see a reference to beehives. So next up after beehives, we've got Punishment Mask. So the Punishment Mask is one of the most expensive Rust skins that you can buy. The reason behind this is the Punishment Mask was originally dropped for sale. A few people bought it and then it was removed from the store for copyright reasons. Since there's so few of those masks that exist, they've become a rare commodity that players are willing to pay over $1,000 for. Yep, that's right. Some people definitely have too much money or they're into some sort of gambling, money laundering type thing. But yeah, we're not really going to talk about that. We're going to just pretend that a lot of people have way too much money. Moving on, we've got backpacks. So backpacks is exactly as it sounds. Players could carry backpacks. It would expand their inventory. And then when they're raiding or they just decided to farm way too much, they can carry more resources. And honestly, it sounds like a great idea. I'd love to see them add backpacks into the game. And I think it would add a cool element to things. If you're going on a raid that's far away, maybe you bring a backpack with you. It adds a little bit more intensity if you get a lot of really good loot. And it would encourage players to roam just a little bit farther. And next up, we've got metal kits. So I know what a metal kit is in Rust, but I'm not sure why that would be a level 2 item on the iceberg. Yeah, I'm a complete loss for that. So I don't know. Metal kits. After metal kits, we've got bunk beds. I think it's pretty obvious what bunk beds are, but if anyone needs me to explain it, basically it would be you've got the space of a sleeping bag, but it would be multiple sleeping bags high. So you could have multiple players spawning into that just little space that a sleeping bag normally takes up. It'd be really great for zergs, duos, trios, or anyone who just has way too many people packed into too small of a base. But at the same time, if you want to support solo gameplay, it's probably best to keep this as just an idea. At least that's my opinion on it. And after that, you've got water mines. Just like bunk beds, I think this is a pretty obvious one, but the idea behind this would be instead of having land mines that exist on land, you'd have water mines that would exist in the water. And then when a boat or unfortunate swimmer hit it, they'd go boom. And yeah, that would be water mines. Next up, you got the Ballista. So this would basically be a word that I can't really pronounce, but hopefully I did say it right. But this was a concept made up by someone called Scott Clark, a 3D artist. They made a ballista concept that would basically be an anti-vehicle projectile. So it would shoot huge arrows at vehicles and could, in theory, incapacitate them. It never came to fruition, but this artist actually created some amazing renders, and the idea itself isn't a bad one. It would be really cool to be able to set something like that up, put a player behind it, and shoot mass arrows into vehicles that could either incapacitate the vehicle or make it unmovable. Yeah, maybe that's one that you could add, like Face Punch. If you're watching this video, and I don't think you are, think about ballistas. It'd be cool. And last but not least, we've got animal husbandry. So this was part of that whole farming system that we talked about earlier in this iceberg. Yeah, animal husbandry just refers to the idea of being able to breed different animals together and create maybe animals that would give you more meat, animals that would give you more leather, animals that would give you more bones, or just put a chicken and pig in the same pen and create a monstrosity. Also, chickens would lay eggs and things like that. It was something that was thought about or talked about back when Rust was talking about making a farming system, a cooking system, and just a lot more sort of depth to the game rather than going the whole direction that they ended up going. And that is the end of part 2 of the Rust Iceberg. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see part 3 and part 4, or just support the fact that I'm making this series of videos, because the more you that like this, the more likely I am to do it again. Until next time, peace.